Cast away from you all the crimes you have committed, says the Lord, and make for yourselves a new heart and a new spirit. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ, King of endless glory. The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Many of the Jews who had come to Mary and had seen what Jesus had done began to believe in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. So the chief priests and the Pharisees convened the Sanhedrin and said, "What are we going to do? This man is performing many signs. If we leave him alone, all will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away both our land and our nation." But one of them, Caiaphas, who was the high priest that year, said to them, "You know nothing, nor do you consider that it is better for you that one man should die instead of the people, so that the whole nation may not perish." He did not say this on his own, but since he was high priest for that year, he prophesied that Jesus was going to die for the nation, and not only for the nation, but also to gather into one the dispersed children of God. So from that day on, they planned to kill him. So Jesus no longer walked about in public among the Jews, but he left for the region near the desert to a town called Ephraim, and there he remained with his disciples. Now the Passover of the Jews was near, and many went up from the country to Jerusalem before Passover to purify themselves. They looked for Jesus and said to one another, as they were in the temple area, "What do you think? That he will not come to the feast?" The Gospel of the Lord. Well, we have come to the end of Lent. This is the final Mass before Holy Week opens, and we close this our Lenten observance with this passage from the Gospel according to John. It's the closing passage of the book of signs. So all the Gospel of John up till this point is coming to this climax of the raising of Lazarus. And the final decision after the raising of Lazarus is the decision to kill Jesus. He has just become too dangerous. And there's three things, I think, to consider in the passage that we just heard. Not only when we consider about human life in general, and we can think of political life on the level of a society or a country, but also of our own souls. The first thing that we can notice about what happens behind this decision, right, the decision to kill Jesus, the first thing we can notice is fear. They are afraid. Initially, this fear is expressed in terms of the Romans coming, the fear that they will lose their nation, the fear that they will also lose their power as the head of that nation. Fear. Fear always precedes an evil decision. We too have to contend with fear in order to do the right thing. But fear is that precursor. Fear, this type of fear, the fear of this kind of loss, is the fear that comes from the evil one. Because the paradox is, the mystery is, it's only by risking the nation, by surrendering the nation, that the kingdom can come. The second thing behind this evil decision is a decision that is based upon expediency rather than the good. choosing what is easiest and what is most efficient and what is most practical, as opposed to doing what is good. Now, this is something that human beings have trouble with in general, and Americans have trouble with it in particular. Right? We are driven by expediency and practicality. And so often, when we hear those arguments to do something that is not good, we can be easily swayed by what is expedient and what is practical. A real good example of this right now, I think, is this whole controversy around stem cell research, right? Of harvesting stem cells from aborted fetuses. Whereas the good thing to do is to develop stem cells that don't involve that. Or the destruction of human life because it's expedient, because it's practical. Right? This too is going on here. The most practical thing here, the safest thing, is that one man die for the nation instead of the whole nation. We too have to contend with that, because when temptation comes to us to choose something evil, oftentimes it gets presented to us as this is what is expedient, and this is what is practical. In a way, that behind that is that rule that is often the basis of many bad decisions, is the end justifies the means. Finally, what we see in this revelation is we really begin to see now the possibility of heaven and hell. You know, before in the Old Covenant, the dead went to Sheol, the place of the dead, and over time there was a sense that the good and the evil were separated in Sheol. But it's not until the coming of the Messiah that the rift between heaven and hell happens. And what we can see here is that the love of God that comes into the world, Jesus Christ himself comes and he forces human beings to make a decision about him. He forces, you will either accept my love or you will harden yourself to my love. And that is where the possibility of heaven and hell open up. The love of God comes, and it's a sword, it's a dividing line between those who will accept, and by not accepting, by rejecting that love, the heart becomes hardened, and this encasement happens around the heart to prevent that love from coming in, and this is where hell happens. The soul that has walled itself off from the love of God. And instead of experiencing divine love as love, it will experience God's love as wrath. The soul that has rejected love will only be tormented by love. So this is what is before us. We have to contend with fear. We have to contend with expediency over the good. And we also have before us the genuine possibility of heaven and hell.